Is that you, my lovely?
Daisy Buchanan, the golden girl. A breathless warmth flowed from her, a promise that there was no one else in the world she so wanted to see.
Do they miss me in Chicago?
What do a 1920s flapper, a 1950s housewife, and a 2020s TikTok influencer all have in common? Despite living in widely different times, they were all performing versions of the same ideal. That girl, the woman who appears effortlessly beautiful, socially admired, and endlessly disciplined. She's the one that always seemed to have it all together, even when the world around her doesn't. Today, she's romanticized on social media through 5 a.m. routines, color-coordinated kitchen pantries, glowing skincare rituals, and clean girl minimalism. She drinks matcha with collagen, journals in perfect cursive, works out daily, and documents every polished moment for her followers. While making it all look effortless, she's not just beautiful, she's balanced, productive, and quietly luxurious. But here's the thing, she isn't new. In fact, she's been here all along. That girl has existed in every decade of the last century, her aesthetic evolving with the times, but her core purposes remaining eerily the same. She's always been the embodiment of society's expectations for women, idealized, commodified, and just out of reach. In this video, we'll journey through the last 100 years of beauty ideals to uncover the many faces of that girl, from the rebellious flapper of the 20s to the hyper-feminine housewife of the 50s, to the modern influencer of today. Each era crafted its own version of perfection, but every generation shared one thing: a woman trying to mold herself into an ideal that was never truly hers. Let's explore how beauty standards have evolved and how the performance of perfection has never really gone out of style.
Now, a word from our sponsor.
Achieving radiant skin, strong nails, and healthy hair isn't just about using the right beauty products. It starts from within. As we age, our body naturally produces less of the key protein responsible for keeping your skin firm, our hair thick, and our nails strong. That's why so many people are turning to natural, science-backed solutions to restore and maintain their youthful glow. Rather than relying on expensive creams or salon treatments, they're focusing on replenishing this essential protein to enhance their beauty from inside out. And no, it's not about chasing the latest beauty trend or stocking up on expensive serums. The real secret lies in collagen, a protein that naturally declines as we get older, but plays a crucial role in maintaining skin elasticity, hair strength, and nail health. Studies have shown that adding collagen to your daily routine can help minimize the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles and support skin hydration, strengthens brittle nails, and even promotes fuller, shinier hair. Many people notice a difference in as little as 2 weeks, making it one of the easiest and most effective ways to maintain youthful, healthy appearance. For everyone watching, there's an exclusive offer, up to 45% off this high-quality, beauty-boosting collagen formula. You can check it out with the link in my pinned comment and description box. With over 8,000 5-star reviews, more than 5 million jars sold, and a full 365-day money-back guarantee, there's absolutely no risk in giving this collagen a try. If you're looking for a simple way to support your natural beauty from the inside out, now is the time to take advantage of the special offer, so don't forget to visit getnativepathcollagen.com/LauraJane. And with this link in my pinned comment, you will get 45% off and free shipping before the deal ends. And now let's jump back into the main video. Chapter 1, the 1920s Flapper Rebellion in Rouge. The Roaring 20s introduced the world to that girl, unlike anything it had seen before. The flapper. She was loud, modern, and unapologetically visible in a world that had spent centuries trying to keep women quiet. She smoked cigarettes in public, wore her lipstick bright red, bobbed her hair into boyish cuts, and danced the Charleston until dawn. In many ways, she looked like the embodiment of a new era, liberated, fearless, and radically different from her corseted predecessors. The cultural shift that birthed her was seismic. Women had just secured the right to vote in the United States with the 19th Amendment in 1920. The trauma of World War I left people eager to abandon rigid traditions and embrace joy and indulgence and modernity. Jazz music filled smoky clubs, speakeasy defied prohibition, and cities pulsed with new energy. The flapper was a perfect symbol of this decade's rebellious spirit. Her look was as daring as her attitude. Gone were the exaggerated curves and hourglass silhouettes of the Edwardian era. The flapper ideal was all about youthful androgyny, flat chests, narrow hips, and a sense of movement over structure. She wore drop-waisted dress that skimmed her body rather than shaping it, and exposed her arms, legs, and even back, a shocking display at the time. Makeup became not just acceptable, but fashionable. Women plucked their brows into thin lines, rouged their cheeks, painted their lips into Cupid's bows, and applied kohl eyeliner to mimic the smoky-eyed look popularized by silent film stars. The image was bold, stylized, and totally new. One of the most iconic faces of the era was Clara Bow, the original It Girl. With her big eyes, flirty expressions, and magnetic energy, she became the gold standard of flapper beauty. She was seductive yet innocent, modern yet approachable, a paradox that defined the new ideal. Magazines and Hollywood films amplified this image, turning the flapper from subculture into a mass-produced fantasy. But here's where the story becomes more complicated. For all her apparent rebellion, the flapper was still a performance, a carefully curated image of liberation sold to women under the guise of freedom. As quickly as women stepped out of their corsets, they stepped into new routines, beauty routines, diets, fashion trends, and consumption cycles that dictated how they should express this so-called independence. Fashion magazines of the 20s were filled with advertisements for slimming garments, skin lightening creams, and makeup tips to achieve the look. Department stores like Macy's and Selfridges capitalized on the new aesthetic, pushing flapper-style dresses, cosmetics, and accessories onto a new class of image-conscious consumers. Freedom, it turned out, was also a business opportunity. And while the flapper celebrated youth and vitality, she excluded many. Women of color, older women, and those outside urban or wealthy circles were often left out of the narrative. The flapper wasn't just about personality, it was about privilege, access, and the ability to consume the trappings of the new lifestyle. So even as the flapper danced away from the Victorian restrictions, she walked straight into a new kind of constraint, one that still measured a woman's worth by her appearance, her desirability, and her ability to keep up. It leaves us wondering, was this truly liberation or simply a shinier, jazzier version of the same old performance? Was that girl in the 20s a symbol of progress, or the beginning of a century-long beauty game that women were still trying to win? Chapter 2. The 1950s Housewife, Beauty and Domesticity. By the time the 50s rolled around, that girl had traded in her flapper, fringe, and jazz age rebellion for something far more structured, far more stifling. In the wake of World War II, society was desperate for stability, and nowhere was this more evident than in the image of the American housewife. She was poised, polished, and perfectly in place, quite literally. That girl now lived in the suburbs, in a picture-perfect ranch home with manufactured lawns, smiling children, and Jell-O in the fridge. Gone was the flapper's carefree charm. In her place stood the idealized domestic goddess, a woman whose entire identity revolved around beauty, home, and her husband. Her beauty was no longer fun or personal expression. It was about discipline and duty. Looking good wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. It was a sign that everything in the household, and by extension the nation, was under control. The 1950s beauty ideal was distinctly hyper-feminine. Soft curls were meticulously set in place with rollers and hairnets. Red lipstick was applied daily, even for a trip to the grocery store. And waistlines were cinched tight with girdles and structured dresses. A flawless face wasn't optional. It was a daily obligation. She wore kitten heels in the kitchen and pearls while vacuuming. Brands like Avon and Max Factor flourished, and beauty routines were marketed not just as self-care, but a civic duty. Fashion magazines and TV shows of the era played a major role in reinforcing these ideals. Characters like June Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver and real-life icons like Doris Day portrayed women who were gracefully wholesome and unflappable and cheerful. Their homes were spotless, their meals elaborate, and their looks immaculate. Even in crisis, the message was clear. Beauty and competence were inseparable. A tidy appearance meant a tidy home, and a tidy home meant a tidy mind. But behind the walls of those pastel-colored kitchens, many women were crumbling. The relentless pursuit of domestic perfection created an invisible prison. While their husbands worked 9-to-5 jobs, women often felt themselves isolated, understimulated, and emotionally unfulfilled. Society told them they had everything they could ever want: security, children, marital comfort. So why were so many of them deeply unhappy? This deep disconnect was famously coined by feminist author Betty Friedan as the problem that had no name. In her groundbreaking 1963 book, The Feminist Mystique, Friedan gave voice to the thousands of women who felt an unshakable sense of emptiness despite checking every societal box of success. I always think of Betty Draper when I think of that. They were exhausted, overburdened, and yet still expected to look like they just had stepped out of a Revlon ad. And then there was the quiet epidemic: tranquilizers. By the late 50s, women were the largest demographic using prescription sedatives in the United States. Drugs like Miltown and Valium, often nicknamed Mother's Little Helper, were prescribed to help women manage the anxiety of their supposedly perfect lives. In reality, these pills were masking an existential crisis created by a culture that conflated feminine worth with aesthetic perfection. But beauty in the 50s was not just a personal standard. It was a societal performance. It meant masking fatigue, anxiety, even depression under layers of foundation and pastel cotton. The housewife ideal gave women a narrow space to exist, beautiful, composed, and above all silent. There was no room for rage, rest, or rebellion, and certainly no room for failure. Which raises the question, can beauty really be effortless when it demands so much labor? When your worth is tied to your reflection, your roast, and your children's haircuts? Is that truly living or just surviving in style? Chapter 3, the 1960s mod girl. Thinness as fashion. The 1960s were a paradox. They were bursting with political unrest and personal liberation, civil rights marches, the feminist movement, the rise of counterculture, and the birth control pill. Yet that girl of the era was increasingly silent, increasingly slight, and nearly vanishing before our eyes. She was the mod girl, a bold aesthetic wrapped around a disappearing frame. Gone were the hourglass curves of the 50s. In their place was a new standard, childlike, androgynous, and radically thin. This version of the that girl wore short skirts, dramatic eyeliner, and a body that looked more like a coat hanger than a real person. The reigning face of this era was Twiggy, the 16-year-old British model who skyrocketed to fame for her doe-eyed stare and impossibly slender figure. With her pixie-cut, spidery lashes and body that barely curved, Twiggy embodied the ideal woman of the 60s, delicate, wide-eyed, and almost ghost-like. She didn't just model fashion, she became it, and her popularity shifted the entire beauty conversation. This shift was seismic. Suddenly, a woman's beauty was synonymous with lightness, as in weightlessness, fragility, and self-erasure. The glorification of thinness wasn't just about looking good. It was framed as being modern, sophisticated, and chic. To be heavy, or even average size, was behind the times. Fashion designers like Mary Quant and Andre Courreges tailored their styles to thin bodies. The miniskirt became the signature garment of the decade, not only sexual in nature, but exclusive to those with long, slender legs. The swinging 60s may have opened doors socially, but when it came to body ideals, they narrowed the frame, literally. Pop culture reinforced this ideal. Audrey Hepburn's portrayal of Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's became a cultural touchstone. She was whimsical, stylish, independent, and most of all thin. Her elegant figure was praised endlessly in magazines, and while her personal charm was undeniable, her image added fuel to a beauty standard that left very little room for variation. This thinness narrative didn't emerge in isolation. Women's magazines at the time were filled with articles about calorie counting, crash diets, and slimming pills. In a decade that celebrated free love and personal agency, women's physical freedom became restricted by a rigid new requirement: be small, be less, and take up less space. And this ideal wasn't just about fashion, it stepped into psychology. Being thin became associated with being in control, especially in contrast to the excesses of the previous decade. Women were taught that restraint was not only attractive, it was a moral virtue. And what's so striking about this era is the contradiction. As women gained more control over their reproductive rights and challenged gender norms through second-wave feminism, their bodies were simultaneously being policed by an increasingly narrow standard. A woman could now choose choose more for herself, but only if it fit the aesthetic of freedom. So it begs the question, what kind of freedom is it if you can't eat? If the cost of liberation is physical erasure, is that really empowerment? Or just another version of the same old performance? Chapter 4, the 1980s power woman, glamour meets grit. In the 1980s, that girl climbed out of the domestic sphere and marched straight into the boardroom. No longer confined to the kitchen or dressing table, she now had a corner office, or at least dreamed of one. This was the age of the power woman, and her beauty was all about control, ambition, and curated authority. She looked the part, shoulder pads that gave her a commanding silhouette, red lipstick that made her both sensual and assertive, and voluminous hair that said she had arrived. Her aesthetic was bold, sharp, and unapologetically high maintenance. Feminine, yes, but also armored. Her outfit was both fashion statement and survival gear. Women were entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers, encouraged by second-wave feminism and economic necessity. But instead of relaxing beauty standards, this shift introduced a new, hyper-demanding archetype. The superwoman. This was a woman who could be a corporate powerhouse by day and a seductress by night, and nurturing mother on weekends, all while looking flawless. In short, she was expected to do everything and to do it beautifully. The beauty ideal of the decade reflected this impossible balancing act. Women were expected to maintain a slim, yet athletic body. Soft curves were still acceptable, but only if slightly sculpted through the daily workouts. This was the era of Jane Fonda, and aerobics tapes sold not just fitness, but a lifestyle. Sweating in a leotard with perfect hair and makeup became a cultural moment. The message was clear: strong was sexy, but only if it was photogenic. Pop culture fully embraced this aesthetic. Characters like Alexis Carrington on Dynasty epitomized power dressing with her statement jewelry, fur coats, and ruthless confidence. She was glamorous and terrifying, the ultimate aspirational villain. Meanwhile, films like Working Girl gave us a more relatable version in Melanie Griffith's character, a secretary who, through pluck and polish, ascends the corporate ladder. She cuts her hair, swaps her sneakers for pumps, and earns her respect, but only after reinventing her image. These narratives reinforce the idea that beauty was part of a woman's professional toolkit. To be taken seriously, she had to appear effortlessly composed, perpetually youthful, and always stylish, but she couldn't look like she was trying too hard. The tightrope walk between ambition and attractiveness was constant, and it was exhausting. This decade also ushered in a new kind of performance, performing strength, the emotional softness and vulnerability of earlier eras replaced by steeliness. Women were told to toughen up, to be assertive, competitive, and driven, but they still had to package it in a visual-pleasing, hyper-feminine wrapper, and the result, a double burden: carry the weight of breaking glass ceilings and do it in heels. This aesthetic sent a seductive message. Beauty now had power, but it also had a cost. Perfection was still expected, just now in 3 roles at once, and instead of shrinking to meet society's demands, that girl had to expand into a flawless multitasking machine. Which raises a question we're still asking today. When you're always performing strength, where's the space to be soft? If beauty isn't measured by how much you can juggle without breaking, what happens when you finally drop the act? Chapter 5, the 1990s cool girl, effortless and unreal. By the 1990s, that girl had a new look and a new attitude. She wasn't polished or pristine. She wasn't perfectly made up or dressed to the nines. She was cool. And in this decade, cool meant one thing above all: pretending to not care. The 1990s cool girl was low maintenance, naturally beautiful, and totally laid back. She wasn't trying to impress you, but somehow she always looked effortlessly gorgeous. She was thin, but didn't diet, at least not publicly. She had sex appeal, but wasn't trying to be sexy. She wore minimal makeup, but still glowed. She was into guy stuff, beers, burgers, sports, but maintained the allure of a romantic fantasy. In other words, she was the perfect contradiction: chill but hot, down to earth but untouchable. This version of that girl rejected the overt femininity of the 80s. Gone were the shoulder pads and red lipsticks. In their place came messy hair, barely their brows, and a heroin-chic body that was thin to the point of fragility. Think Kate Moss strutting down runways in slip dresses with smudge eyeliner and visible collarbones. Her famous quote, "Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels," captured the brutal honesty behind the era's aesthetic, whether people wanted to admit it or not. The beauty look of the 90s was the ultimate bait and switch. The makeup was subtle, matte skin, brown lip liner, sheer foundation, but achieving that I woke up like this glow required just as much effort as the previous decade. The ideal was natural, but it wasn't real. Pop culture idolized this aesthetic. And there's something about Mary with Cameron Diaz who embodied this archetype, effortlessly beautiful, funny, laid back, and completely chill about everything. And in Reality Bites, Winona Ryder's character was grunge adjacent, smart, misunderstood, and adorable in flannel. This kind of girl didn't need to try. She just was, and that made her all that more desirable. But perhaps the most brutal takedown of this persona came years later in Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl, where the character Amy Doon gives a biting monologue dissecting the cool girl archetype. Being the cool girl means I am hot, brilliant, funny woman who adores football, poker, dirty jokes, and burping, who plays video games, drinks cheap beer, and jams hot dogs and hamburgers into her mouth, while somehow maintaining a size 2. Flynn's writing highlights the uncomfortable truth behind the 1990s beauty ideal. The cool girl wasn't just effortless, she was performing effortlessness, and that performance was for men. While the cultural conversation told women to be authentic and to just be yourself, beauty culture sent the opposite message. Photoshop and airbrushing reached their peak in fashion magazines. Even the cool girl aesthetic insisted it was real. The images women were shown were heavily edited and completely unattainable. You were supposed to look casual, but be perfect. You weren't supposed to care, but you better still be flawless. There was also a strong undercurrent of not like other girls energy in this decade. The cool girl was special because she was different from those other girls who wore too much makeup, talked too much about their feelings, or gasped, tried too hard. This created a toxic dichotomy where women were either desirable or desperate, relaxed or ridiculous, cool or clingy. So even in a decade obsessed with irony and rebellion, beauty ideals still demanded submission. They just asked for it in ripped jeans and smudged eyeliner. And it leads us to an important question. Can authenticity be real if it's still curated? If you're still expected to meet the same impossible beauty standards, but pretend to look no effort, are you really free? Or are you wearing a different kind of mask? I mean, the 90s were rough, the beauty standards in the 90s and early 2000s. I was coming of age at that time, and it definitely affected me. Chapter 6, the 2010s Fitzbo Wellness as Worth. By the 2010s, that girl had swapped her skinny jeans for Lululemon leggings and her beer for a green smoothie with collagen and chia seeds. This decade's version of the ideal woman wasn't just attractive, she was healthy, or at least she performed health convincingly. This was the rise of the Fitzbo Queen, short for fitness inspiration, a woman who was lean, glowing, impossibly disciplined, and fully optimized. Unlike previous beauty ideals that prioritized aesthetics alone, the 2010s wrapped beauty in the language of self-care and personal growth. To be beautiful wasn't just about how you looked, it was about how you lived. She rose at 5 a.m., meditated, meal prepped, tracked her macros, and posted transformational Tuesday selfies with motivational quotes. Her beauty wasn't supposed to be effortless anymore. In fact, it had to look earned. The ideal body of the Fitzbo era was sculpted but never bulky, tan but not orange, and natural but still filtered. Think abs with just the right definition, flawless skin without visible trace of makeup, and a constant glow that said, I drink lemon water and I don't have anxiety. And social media exploded with this aesthetic. Hashtags like fit girl, bikini body, clean eating dominated platforms like Instagram, Pinterest, and influencers like Kayla, It's Signs, and her grueling 28-minute workouts, and later Chloe Ting with her 2-week ab challenges became digital fitness icons. Their message was seductive. You can look like this too if you try hard enough. But the dark flip side of this message is, if you don't look like this, it's your fault. The version of that girl was no longer about pleasing men directly. She was working on herself for herself. But that framing often masked a deeper truth. Her worth was still being measured in discipline, thinness, and control. She may have traded high heels for running shoes, but the pressure remained. Now, instead of looking good for someone else, she was expected to build herself into a brand of internalized hustle. And historically, this marked a subtle return to older forms of female restriction. In the Victorian era, women were praised for their emotional strength and moral purity. Now they were praised for clean eating and strict routines and aesthetic discipline. The Victorian woman had to suppress her rage. The Fitzbo woman had to suppress her appetite. Perhaps the most insidious part of this era was how capitalism and wellness intertwined. The wellness industry ballooned into a multi-billion-dollar market, selling supplements, detox teas, boutique fitness memberships, and avocado toast as the answer to not just your body image, but your entire self-worth. Health wasn't just about longevity, it was a lifestyle marketable, visual, and endlessly Instagrammable. And in all of this striving, a critical question remained. If your beauty is always a project, are you ever allowed to rest? When your entire life becomes a to-do list of being your best self, what happens when you're too tired to perform perfection? Because in the end, that girl of the 2010s may have looked strong, but beneath the motivational mantras was a woman just trying to keep up. Chapter 7, the 2020s clean girl, minimalist, perfect, and exhausted. Now we've come full circle. That girl in the 2020s has been stripped of neon spandex, smoky eyes, and bold aesthetics. Today's ideal woman is cool-toned, barely there, and impossibly curated. She's known as the clean girl, a woman whose beauty appears effortless, minimal, and deeply calming. But make no mistake, this kind of effortlessness takes work. The clean girl wakes up in a cream-colored bedroom filled with natural light. Her hair is slicked into a tidy bun. She wears gold hoops, perfectly arched brows, and no makeup, which ironically involves at least 20 products from prestige skincare brands. Her water bottle is oversized and pastel. Her matcha is oat-based and frothy. Everything about her, from her skincare to her refrigerator, is coordinated, intentional, and aesthetically soothing. Pop culture have fully embraced her. On TikTok, the clean makeup and clean look hashtag showcase millions of videos detailing how to achieve the clean girl aesthetic. Think Hailey Bieber with her glazed donut skin, Sophia Richie in her old money neutrals, or influencers like Matilda who embody soft luxury with quiet, controlled precision. These women built empires on the appearance of minimalism, looking natural into high production art form. The beauty ideal of this era is one of restraint, control, and low-key luxury. Dewy skin is in, but it must be poreless and glowing. Complexions are flawless, but naturally, so often the result of expensive facials, laser treatments, and skincare that cost more than rent. Neutral palettes dominate, taupe, beige soft, nothing too loud, nothing too bold. It's a return to simplicity, but one that is highly engineered. This version of that girl isn't just beautiful, she's marketable. She's a walking brand. Her life is filtered through an aesthetic lens, clean lines, quiet moments, curated routines. And for influencers and micro-celebrities, this look is monetized down to the last cuticle. The clean girl doesn't just sell products, she is the product. But beneath the dewy sheen lies a troubling truth. This aesthetic, while soothing on the surface, demands constant upkeep. Her world has to look perfect every single day. Not just for herself, but for her audience, for her validation, engagement, and brand deals. Even rest becomes content. Even wellness becomes performance. The clean girl cannot afford to break down or break character. In many ways, this is less a beauty routine and more a soft, palatable kind of performance art. It's femininity rebranded through soft lighting and algorithmic appeal. But it's still a role, one that asks women to be polished but not provocative, luxurious but not loud, productive but never messy. She must be disciplined, desirable, and digitally digestible. And so we ask, is this still beauty or is it a performance art? When femininity becomes a feed and your face becomes a filter, where does authenticity end and branding begin? The clean girl may be the quietest that girl yet, but her silence speaks volumes about the pressure to appear effortlessly perfect in a world that never stops watching. From the flapper's rebellious bob to the clean girl's slick back bun, the version of that girl has constantly evolved. But the pressure to become her has remained chillingly consistent. Across every decade, she's worn different clothes, painted on different faces, and adopted different routines. Yet, at her core, she's always been the same, an ideal that promises fulfillment, but thrives on your longing. That girl just isn't a fleeting aesthetic. She's a cultural blueprint that women have inherited over a century. And every era has sold her with the same underlying message. Be beautiful and you'll be worthy. Be desirable and you'll be happy. Be perfect and you'll be finally enough. But perfection, as it turns out, is a moving target, and that girl is always just out of reach, because she was never designed to be attainable. She was designed to keep women striving, always improving, always consuming, and always comparing themselves to an illusion. Whether it was the corset of the 50s, the collagen smoothie of the 2020s, the tools may have changed, but the goal has remained. Mold yourself to fit an impossible standard. The most insidious part of that girl is how often she appears empowering. In every decade, she's framed as a choice, a lifestyle, a version of becoming your best self. But how free can a choice really be if it's always shaped by invisible pressures, capitalism, patriarchy, and the never-ending gaze of society? We're told we're in control, but so often we're just changing costumes inside the same old performance. So maybe it's time to shift the question. Instead of asking, how do I become her? What if we ask, who am I when I stop performing? Who are we without the filters, the hustle, and the endless pressure to be effortlessly perfect? Because real beauty isn't about fitting into a decade. It's not about becoming that girl or the moment. It's about stepping outside the timeline entirely and learning to be enough as you are. And which version of that girl did you grow up with or try to become? Let me know in the comments below. I feel like I was in the late 90s, early 2000s, that girl before that girl was a thing, but I feel like every decade had that version, if you know what I mean. And if this video made you reflect and think about things, let me know in the comments below. I'm always curious your thoughts. But I mean, I feel like even if people say that, oh, that girl aesthetic is done, I feel like there's just going to be a new version of that girl that we subconsciously will name it something else. Anyways, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.